So, how does a health body know if they should be implementing this legislation? I spoke to Nick Martin to find out. So Nick, how does a health body know whether or not they should be implementing this legislation?
The removal powers granted under the legislation are voluntary, and a trust really needs to make sure that the use of the common law civil trespass is appropriate for NHS staff.
I see, so whereas the CJIA legislation is sort of tailor-made, isn't it, for this sort of incident in a hospital premises?
Yes, exactly, and it gives NHS staff the protection of knowing really that they're removing somebody within the framework of law.
So what does a health body need to do to assess whether they can implement this legislation, and who should they be consulting?
Well, first of all, they should be speaking with the health body legal advisors, but also running it by the Risk and/or Health and Safety Board for the Trust. They also need to be aware of the staff numbers that are available at the Trust, and also security staff if they're going to implement any parts of the removal process.
What happens if there aren't enough staff?
Well, if there aren't enough staff, I'd say that they can always consult with the local police, or obviously make them aware of the fact that they're going to be using the powers under the legislation, but they'll also be needing assistance from the police to physically remove under Section 120.
Now, you've mentioned authorised officers and appropriate staff members there. Obviously very important key roles in this legislation. What would an authorised officer be responsible for? It's
the authorised officer's responsibility to make the assessment and authorise the removal of an individual under the legislation.
And what kind of role would they have?
Well, that's entirely up to the Trust to make the decision on, but it can be anyone from a charge nurse to a senior nurse, matron, midwife. But they can also be an appropriate staff member, although best practice really is that that person should be separate.
And what about the appropriate NHS staff member? What's their responsibility?
Well, it's their responsibility to actually remove the individual under Section 120. However, any person that's chosen, and it's up to the Trust to decide who that person would be, needs to really be familiar with things such as conflict resolution training and physical intervention techniques.
So that's really a major way in which they'll be selected?
That's crucial.
The CJIA legislation is tailor-made for precisely the kind of situation that might occur on hospital premises. It gives NHS staff the right protection and the confidence that they're removing a person within the framework of the law. Authorised officers are responsible for assessing whether a person has committed the offence, while appropriate staff members will be responsible for removing a person who has committed the offence under Section 119 of the legislation.